From day one in his administration, Joe Biden declared an all-out war on American energy production and exploration. He made it clear that he cares more about appeasing the radical climate change activists than protecting the millions of oil and gas workers and producers in America.
This amendment is one more controversial poison pill policy rider that sadly shows extremist Republicans are not interested in bills that can gain bipartisan support and become law. I do not understand why my Republican colleagues would seek to undermine the efforts that address those weaknesses and protect the American public.
I was disappointed but not surprised this July when the Biden administration filed this proposed rule entitled Fluid Mineral Leases and Leasing Process, which mandates provisions from the partisan so-called Inflation Reduction Act, better known as the Green New Deal in disguise, which increased the royalty rate for production on federal lands while also increasing and creating new fees for domestic energy producers. This new fluid mineral leasing rule is further proof that Joe Biden is using every tool in his administration to dismantle American energy production.
The proposed rule on fluid mineral leases and the leasing process aims to enhance the administration of oil and gas-related activities on America's public lands and reflects provisions in recently enacted laws that modify aspects of the federal onshore oil and gas program whose regulation have not been updated since 1988. But this amendment seeks to prohibit that. Once again, my Republican colleagues are disregarding the law. This amendment circumvents the rigorous process that is in place to update outdated regulations, which includes opportunities for public input, protect the fiscal interests of the American public, and ensure proper stewardship of public lands and resources for the benefit of future generations. The Government Accountability Office and the Department of the Interior's Office of Inspector General have conducted audits of the BLM's federal onshore oil and gas program and highlighted weaknesses that BLM needs to correct to ensure the American public receives a fair return from oil and gas activities on public lands. I urge my colleagues to reject this amendment to protect the fiscal interests of the American public and our natural resources so future generations benefit from a world with healthy ecosystems and robust biodiversity.
I rise today to offer my amendment to prohibit funding for the bicycle subsidy benefit program at the Department of Interior. I wish I were kidding. The DOI Bicycle Subsidy Benefit Program provides taxpayer dollars to DOI employees and paid student interns or unpaid student volunteers for the purchase, improvements, repair, storage, and/or maintenance of a non-motorized bicycle that is used as a primary means of commuting to and from work, as well as a monthly stipend. Can't make this up. American taxpayers' hard-earned money is being wasted on covering bicycle commuting expenses such as bicycles, bicycle locks, bicycle parking storage, bicycle safety equipment, bicycle improvements or accessories including reflective lights, racks, bicycle repairs and general maintenance, personal safety and protective equipment including high visibility safety apparel, headwear, and bicycle gloves, and bicycle share memberships, as well as getting paid to bike to work. DOI employees are going to bike to work because they want to bike to work, not because taxpayers are being forced to shell out $20 a month to federal bureaucrats that participate in this absurd and ridiculous program. Democrats want us to continue to print money and pay bureaucrats to bike to work when our so-called commander-in-chief doesn't even know how to properly ride one. Maybe we should subsidize some bicycle lessons for the president while we're at it. I urge my colleagues to support my amendment to cut wasteful federal spending by prohibiting funding for the Bicycle Subsidy Benefit Program at the Department of Interior. Mr. Chair, I reserve.
So this amendment would block the Department of Interior from its Bicycle Subsidy Benefit Program, which encourages federal employees to use bicycles and to commute to the office. Not unlike many wellness programs that are there available in the public and private sector, this is a good idea for the fresh air, for our personal health, for a whole host of reasons. It's also good for the environment. More of us should be on bicycles instead of occupying a car to commute back and forth to work. The department created this program in response to a 1993 law in which Congress authorizes each agency head to establish a program to encourage employees to use means other than single occupancy motor vehicles to commute to and from work. It's a government-wide program, and this amendment unfairly targets interior employees. I urge my colleagues to treat all employees fairly. Reject this amendment. I yield back my time.
I rise today to offer my amendment that utilizes the Holman Rule to reduce the salary of Director of Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, Elizabeth Klein, to $1. Ms. Klein is a radical environmentalist and a partisan hack comprised by special interests and mired in ethical conflicts. Her conflicts of interest were so severe that even Senator Manchin voted to block her nomination as Deputy Secretary of the Interior. Radical, partisan extremists have no place in the federal government, especially those in charge of our energy industry.
Mr. Chair, this amendment is petty and punitive. Rather than pursuing grudges against public servants and spewing inaccurate and disrespectful information, my colleagues across the aisle should focus their energy on negotiating with the Senate on a bill to fund the government. I urge my colleagues to reject this amendment, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I rise to offer my amendment that prohibits the Biden administration from taking any action to finalize, implement, or enforce their proposed Endangered Species Act rules proposed on June 22, 2023. For far too long, radical environmentalists have weaponized the ESA against farmers, ranchers, landowners, and our rural communities. The proposed rules abandons clear and well-functioning Trump-era reforms in favor of one-size-fits-all mandates from disconnected Washington bureaucrats. President Trump and his administration recognize the differences between threatened and endangered species. In doing so, FWS rescinded the prior blanket rule that automatically granted endangered level protections to species listed as threatened. Joe Biden's plan to restore this blanket rule will lead to more red tape and burdensome regulations on rural communities, and they simply can't afford that.
The Endangered Species Act is the nation's principal conservation law, whose ultimate goals include preventing the extinction of species and providing for their recovery. On June 4th, 2021, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's National Marine Fisheries Service announced a plan to improve and strengthen implementation of the Endangered Species Act to address 21st century conservation challenges. These agencies are proposing to revise 3 final rules issued in 2019 under the previous administration that do not adequately guide the implementation of the Endangered Species Act. The proposed revisions are intended to improve and clarify the interagency consultation processes, listing, delisting, and reclassification decisions, and designation of critical habitat. Why would anyone object to making regulations clearer, more straightforward, or improving implementation of the Endangered Species Act? The services also propose to reinstate the 4D blanket rule, options for protecting and conserving threatened species. Remember, providing a suite of protections for threatened species will help it avoid becoming an endangered species. These proposed rules are now subject to public review and comment, and the services will carefully consider the comments they receive before finalizing any changes. The proposed revisions do not alter the standards for making listing and delisting decisions, nor will they automatically lead to an increase or decrease in the total amount or area of critical habitat that is designated. These decisions will still depend on the services using the best scientific information available. I urge my colleagues to consider how these revisions will make ESA regulations more consistent and efficient, and to reject this amendment. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I rise today to offer my amendment that prohibits the Bureau of Land Management from taking any action to finalize, implement, or enforce a draft resource management plan and draft supplemental environmental impact statement to end new oil leases on 1.6 million acres in Colorado. Colorado's West Slope used to have a booming energy production economy. Unfortunately, we've been regulated into poverty in Colorado's 3rd District. I remember when I owned a small business, roughnecks used to come into my restaurant, and I knew that it was going to be a good, successful, profitable day because I had mud on my floor to clean up. But through regulations, there was no more mud to clean up on nearly any of our business floors, and many businesses shuttered forever. There used to be 112 rigs on the West Slope, but now we have 4 drilling rigs. Now, not in my backyard, extremists and job-killing federal policies have driven away these good-paying jobs.
We are now only 15 days away from a government shutdown, and instead of focusing on keeping the government open, we're working on a bill that is going nowhere. The draconian cuts proposed in this bill violate the agreement reached by former Speaker McCarthy and President Biden that were memorialized in statute and public law 118-5, the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2023. We would not be teetering on the brink of a government shutdown if my Republican colleagues had held up their end of the bargain. We are here to protect the welfare of the American public, and we cannot close our eyes to the impacts of climate change, such as the drought, flooding, severe storm, and wildfire events we are experiencing. As of October 10th, the United States has experienced 24 confirmed weather-climate disaster events with losses exceeding $1 billion each. This is a new record. This amendment seeks to prohibit funding for the Bureau of Land Management to finalize, implement, and enforce a draft resource management plan and draft supplemental environmental impact statement that would remove 1.6 million acres of public lands in Colorado from future oil and gas leasing. These lands do not have high oil and gas potential, and BLM's actions protect the important wildlife habitat, recreation areas, water resources, as well as reduce emissions and the impacts of climate change. Not investing in strategies that minimize and prevent the acceleration of climate change, and instead paying billions in disaster relief, shows my Republican colleagues are not thinking about what is best for the American taxpayer. Our economy, health, livelihoods, food security, and quality of life all depend on healthy ecosystems. I urge my colleagues to reject this amendment and focus instead on addressing climate change and making our nation stronger.